40 years ago, I was shot 5 times and left on an airstrip in South America. I live with that every single day. I'm proud to say that I was the author and co-author of legislation in California back in the 90s when we wanted to ban assault weapons. Presenting this bill that Senator David was the Senate author of. And I'm making the case why we needed to ban assault weapons in California. And then one of my colleagues raised his microphone, as we are apt to do when we want to ask questions on the assembly floor. And he was recognized, and he said, "Ms. Speier, you're carrying this legislation on assault weapons, but let me ask you a question. Have you ever shot an assault weapon?" And then he repeated it again and said, "Have you ever shot an assault weapon?" As if, how could I possibly be carrying legislation on assault weapons unless I had used one? And I looked at him and I thought, if you are stupid enough to ask me that question, I'm going to give it right back to you. And so I said to him, "No, I am not Assemblyman Bowler, but let me ask you a question. Have you ever been shot by an assault weapon?" And the good news about that story is the whole assembly chamber went quiet. He sat down. One of his colleagues on the other side of the aisle said to him, "Good job, Ted," referring to Ted Baxter on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And that bill flew off the assembly floor, went to then Governor Pete Wilson's desk, a Republican, and he signed it into law. So it's not that in that much distant past that we had Republicans and Democrats working together to solve this problem. We have got to do it again. So, just so we can put it in perspective, I know these are numbers, but it's really important to hear them. 5% of the world's population lives in the United States. We own 45% of the guns in the world. We also have 31% of the mass shootings in the world, although we only represent 5% of the population. And of all the wealthy countries in the world, those young people under the age of 15 who are killed, 91% of them live in the United States of America. That is shameful, and that has to change. So, we have an extraordinary program for you today, and I want you to put your hands together and say thank you to my Deputy District Director who magically made all of this happen, Katrina Will. We have reason to be hopeful and optimistic because H.R. 8 passed the House of Representatives and is now in the Senate, and it's incumbent on each and every one of us to demand that that bill is taken up and that members of the Senate be accountable for where they stand. Now, in addition to my staff, I want to say a special thank you to Superintendent Magee, who you will be hearing from shortly, and Patricia Love from the San Mateo County Office of Education, who helped make this possible, Mary McGrath, Laura Chalkley, Sarah Cowie, Lindsay Martins, and Liz Parker from the San Mateo Union High School District. Are you here? If so, will you all stand? Robert Disney, Sheikah Hamilton from the Brady campaign, and Ellen Ginsberg from Moms Demand Action. We care about this issue locally. And as I've worked this issue for over 30 years now, I'm convinced that we're going to have to do more locally. And San Mateo County is once again leading the way. And with us this morning is Dave Pine, our county supervisor. Dave? Let me tell you what San Mateo County did under the leadership of Dave Pine very recently. They passed an ordinance that applies only in the unincorporated areas of the county that basically says if you own a gun, you have got to have a lock on it. Now, that's important because, toddlers are getting hold of these guns and shooting, and over 200 of them die every year because of it. It's a tragic situation. It doesn't have to be that way. So not only did Dave Pine, our supervisor, get that passed on the county level, he is now challenging every city in San Mateo County to do the same thing. Locally, go to your local city councils, demand that they take action. We have some of them here, not to put them on the spot, but I'm grateful that they are here because obviously they care about this issue. From the Burlingame City Council, Michael Brownrigg. From San Mateo City Council, Rick Bonilla. Hillsborough Town Council, Marie Schwann. From the San Paulo City Council, Laura Palmer-Lehan. And from the Police Department in San Bruno, Police Chief Ed Barberini. We have Elizabeth Burdell from Pacifica School Board. Luann Carlomagno from the Hillsborough Superintendent of Schools. Don Geddes and Ann Chen from the Hillsborough School District. Alan Sauber from the Sequoia Union High School District as a trustee. All right, have I forgotten anyone who is here? All right. Mass shooting is defined as one where there are at least 4 people shot. While these mass shootings do not kill the majority of gun violence victims, they are the shootings that we see on the news. They are so horrific and deadly that the images of them are burned into our common consciousness, like eternal scars. Columbine, Las Vegas, Orlando, Virginia Tech, Newtown, San Isidro, San Bernardino, Parkland. In Parkland, a former student at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School killed 17 children and adults. But something was very different this time. The students could have easily, overwhelmed by the grief that they endured, do nothing except try to pick up the pieces. That's not what they did. They marched to the Capitol in Tallahassee and demanded action. Now, Florida is a big NRA state. So the audacity of these young people to think that they could go to Tallahassee 3 weeks before the end of their legislative session and get something done How unlikely. Except, how incredible. Within less than a month of that massacre, the governor signed legislation that the students demanded that did the following. No one could buy a gun under the age of 21. Waiting periods would be required for all gun purchases, and bump stocks would be banned in the state of Florida. So what I say is, baby boomers, move over, let the young people. We are honored and privileged to be joined by two students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School this morning. And a special shout out and thank you to the Brady campaign who flew them from Florida to California so they could be here today. We're going to hear from Mizrahi and then from Jonathan Blank. Both of these young people lived through that horrific experience. And they are going to tell you how they have survived and thrived and how they are changing the world. Please welcome Meagan.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? All right. Hi. So my name is Meagan. I'm a student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I'm in 12th grade now, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about my story on February 14th of last year. So last year on Valentine's Day, I went from delivering carnation flowers with one of my best friends, and in moments I went from delivering these flowers to being curled up in my personalization 4th period class and just had no idea what was going on. We waited for about 3 hours, wondering and slowly getting updates on our phones of people being injured, of what was going on. And those moments will forever stay with me, and they really changed my view on gun violence in general. After the first couple of days of flowers and letters and all of the love from all around the world, we kind of just all looked at each other, all the students, like, now what? Like, are we just going to cry? Like, is this what we have to do now? So our broken community, piece by piece, some of us, about 100 students, went up to our capital in Tallahassee, and we just kind of talked to our politicians. We asked them, we said, this is what happened. What are we going to do? We kind of were like, where's the manager? Like come on. And we have the privilege of growing up in a community of affluence where we believe that it's okay to stand up with what we believe is right. A lot of communities around the country, they think if something happens to them, that's just how it is. And it's our job with this ability to communicate this information, to stand up for not only ourselves, but for other people that don't have this privilege. From Tallahassee, slowly 1 month later, we were in Washington, D.C. with March for Our Lives. And we felt really empowered and inspired. And of course, with all of the excitement of seeing change in the near future, we kept on moving and pushing forward. And I think one thing that's really important for us to keep spreading the message of is of youth and of young people of standing up and speaking up. We can't expect older people or just other people in general to do things that we need to do. A lot of people think that this is a Republican issue, a Democrat issue, but this is very much an American issue. And country whose principles are based on what the people want. And I do not think these people want any more of their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons and daughters dying every day. That's just not something that we need to be doing. And we are in a very developed country where an epidemic of people dying that is in our control is unapprehendable. It makes no sense. So that's a little bit about what I want to say. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Blank. I'm also a senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And on February 14th, 2018, I was in the freshman building where the shooting took place. I was in the third classroom that the shooter shot into. This was one of the scariest moments of my life. I didn't know anything that was going on at the time, and everyone was just in complete shock. The law enforcement got there as soon as possible, and when they showed up, they had their guns drawn at us. And as a student, as a junior in high school, I don't think I was going to school planning on seeing a cop pointing an assault rifle at me because someone came into my school shooting into my school. This day has changed my life forever. Wherever I'm at, wherever I'm going, I'm always looking at the exits, I'm always looking at the corners, and I'm always observing where everything is at the moment. And this isn't how a child should have to live their life. This isn't how anyone should have to live their life. No one should have to think, what do I do if someone comes into the room and starts shooting? That's not what someone should be thinking. And unfortunately, at this time in our lives, it's what I feel like everyone is thinking, and it's just unacceptable. And we need to start making large changes in our assault rifle sales, and they need to be stopped of selling, and we need to have large, strict background checks in order to stop these people from getting guns, because they shouldn't have the right to hold onto a firearm if they can't, if they don't have the mental capability to do so. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to meet two of our local activists. First is Kati Sandoval. She's a senior at San Mateo High School. She helped to organize the March for Our Lives last year. Kati, tell us what motivates you to get involved.
Hello. I was really motivated with the group of students here at San Mateo County. I'd say we as a generation have seen numerous mass shootings occur, and through social media, the news, I'd say we've become really numb to all these mass shootings. And after seeing the work the students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas completed, they didn't stop at, I'm gonna mourn my friends who passed away. They created an action and a movement which really created an awareness across the country. It got to California, from Florida. I'd say their stories have touched everyone in this country, especially the youth. And the work that they did really motivated us to create a change locally. We assembled our friends, our family, and we really wanted to tell our local representatives that we are concerned about what's happening with gun violence, and we want these changes to be implemented here in California and San Mateo. And I'd say that the work they have done has changed the way in which the youth thinks about social issues. We have become a lot more cognizant of our surroundings, what is happening with this day and age. And I'd say that their work has really sparked a sense of motivation towards a lot of individuals. And I would like to thank you guys personally. Thank you for what you've gone through and for all the work that you have done to help spark a change within other people around the country. I'd say that in a time and age where we're living, we have become afraid of going to our places of worship, theaters, schools, especially as a student with everything that occurred last year and has occurred through the years. And I'd say having the strength to get up and fight big organizations like the NRA, talk to our representatives and legislative individuals shows a lot of courage, and that we're here to talk about an issue that's affecting everyone in this country, no matter your political agenda, your left or right. This issue is affecting everyone, and we really need to find a common ground to find policies which will help us create a change so we feel safe in places where we shouldn't worry about being gunned down. And I'd say that there's a long way to go, but with the things that have occurred, with the actions that the youth has taken, there are steps that are being taken to bring more awareness and to help just bring a change forth, whether it be having youth in taking positions in governmental roles, whether applying for your local, your local governmental positions, and just becoming more aware of what's occurring. I'd say thank you.
Now we're going to hear from Michael Breen, who is a junior at Palo Alto High School. He has experienced a lockdown at his school and has helped organize rallies and marches. Miles, tell us about your activism and motivation.
Well, first off, I want to start out by thanking Congresswoman Speier and her staff for inviting me, and for the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas students for inspiring me to get to this point. 5 days after the March for Our Lives, my own school, Palo Alto High School, was put on lockdown after a call and threat of gun violence. We were 5 minutes into class after lunch, and we heard a faint voice over the PA. "This is not a drill. Get into your classes. We have a code red emergency." A few seconds later, we went to make a barricade, and like we had done so many times before, only this time our adrenaline had skyrocketed. Once we were done, we sat in dead silence, fearing that it would be broken by screams or gunshots. After an hour, we were excused from class. There were 5 separate police departments that arrived on the scene a few minutes after the initial threat. Unfortunately, that's not the reality for a lot of communities that deal with this on a daily basis. It's important to remember that gun violence does not just affect the deceased. It affects their families and friends, people that witnessed it, people with PTSD from these tragedies, and the countless amount of people that think, "Am I next?" We thought that on March 29, 2019. Now we don't even talk about the lockdown anymore. 2018. This would normally be a life-changing event, and it sort of was for me. But in the context of last year, when school shootings were pretty much a weekly event, we were lucky. The combination of witnessing youth activism and almost being a victim of one of these tragedies brought me to an organization with the same ideals as my own, Shattering the Silence. Shattering the Silence was founded last summer when we began to rally across the country. These rallies, held in 13 U.S. cities, were done with the intent to honor the victims of the Las Vegas shooting and to advocate for a ban on bump stocks and universal background checks. Finally, to all the people who shout us down and belittle us, Just know that most of us can't vote yet, but there are more of us coming. We might not have a vote, but we have a voice. Thank you.
Another movement has kept the spotlight on gun violence prevention. Hashtag this is our lane and hashtag this is my lane went viral on social media when the NRA tweeted at the American College of Physicians, "Stay in your lane." The American College of Physicians had recommended in a position paper that medical professionals have a special responsibility to speak out on the prevention of gun violence injuries and appropriate regulations of the purchase of legal firearms. On November 7th, just hours before a former Marine shot dead 12 people at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, California, the NRA lashed out at doctors with a tweet, quote, "Someone should tell self-important anti-gun doctors to stay in their lane," unquote. The response was epic. Doctors and medical professionals across the country pushed back. One especially memorable response came from Dr. Julie Melinek, a forensic pathologist from San Francisco. She tweeted, quote, "Do you have any idea how many bullets I pull out of corpses weekly? This isn't just my lane, it's my effing highway." Now we will meet a surgeon whose lane definitely is gun violence prevention. Dr. Dean Winslow is a Stanford physician and academic and a retired Air Force colonel. Last year he co-founded SAFE, Scrubs, Addressing the Firearm Epidemic. In 2017, this long and esteemed career propelled him to be nominated as the next Assistant Secretary for the Defense for Health Affairs by President Trump. When he was asked about the Sutherland Springs church shooting that killed 26 and injured 20, he said, and I quote, "I'd also like to just say how insane it is in the United States of America a civilian can go out and buy a semi-automatic weapon like an AR-15, unquote. His nomination was then put on an indefinite hold. And in December 2017, Dr. Winslow withdrew from consideration. His moral compass is spot on. And he knows what he's talking about. He has seen the physical and psychological devastation bullets can cause. Please welcome Dr. Winslow.
Thank you so much, Representative Speier, for putting this together. Katrina Rill, your chief of staff, for really a tremendous amount of work that went into really making this happen. I'd also like to thank the fellow members of the panel, including the superintendent of schools. My mom was a public school teacher for 35 years, and I'm a product all the way through of the public school system. So, cheer for public education. Of course, the amazing students here that are putting so much energy into this really important work. And thank all of you that took the time to come here and to really care about something that I think is of extreme importance. Thank you again for inviting me to participate. I come before you really wearing many hats. Number one, as a doctor who took an oath to care for patients and also to prevent disease. Secondly, as a former military officer who during the course of multiple combat deployments has seen up close the horrific injuries resulting from gunshot wounds. Third, a father who loves his children more than life itself. Fourth, as a Christian who believes that the central teaching of the New Testament is that of unconditional love for all human beings, and also to be our brother's keeper, and especially to protect and care for the vulnerable in our population. The ready availability of guns in the U.S., as Representative Speier said, results in the deaths of somewhere between 38 and 40,000 people each year in the U.S. And these are suicides, about 2/3 of these deaths, very tragically, homicides and accidental shootings. Gun violence truly is a health crisis and a public health issue. We can do better. And we need to advocate for research on gun violence and develop evidence-backed interventions to reduce gun violence in the U.S. We need to teach doctors, nurses, teachers, social workers how to educate their patients, pupils, and their parents on gun safety. And I've long thought that we should really think of firearms the way we do, for example, ownership and operation of cars, motor vehicles, and even maybe... Also, and anybody here in this room fly or is a pilot? So anyway, for those of you in the room, actually, I think because of just the tremendously devastating potential of guns, that maybe we should go a little bit farther and sort of think of even more of how to regulate guns and people who want to own guns the way we do aircraft ownership, which is a little bit more rigorous than even owning and operating an automobile. In addition to universal background checks, we should, I believe very strongly, we should have universal federal registration and periodic re-registration of all guns. We should require safe storage of all weapons, an initial and periodic requalification by a certified firearms instructor on all weapons in one's possession, periodic physical exams, including at least an informal mental health assessment of all who want to keep a gun in their private possession, and required liability insurance. And lastly, I feel very strongly about restricting military-style semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines to licensed gun ranges. Again, as you heard just a few minutes ago, the National Rifle Association last November said that, quote, someone should tell those self-important anti-gun doctors to stay in their lane. My response is that this issue has always been in our lane, and the time for action is upon us. Thank you all very much.
So the genesis of this particular town hall occurred because one person came into my office and made a case for why she was compelled to do something about this issue. And I thought, it's time to have another discussion about gun violence prevention. The Columbine High School shooting happened 20 years ago, almost to the day, April 20th, 1999. 2 students murdered, 12 students, and 1 teacher. At the time, it was like the deadliest high school shooting in the country. Sadly, that number has been surpassed many times. We're now going to hear from someone who grew up in Columbine and witnessed the aftermath of the massacre in a very personal manner. When the discussion about arming teachers after the Parkland shooting hit the headlines, she felt compelled to speak out. She wanted to share the lessons that should have been learned from Columbine. So she's dedicated a year of her life to doing just that. Meagan Fishell reached out to my office and many others. And she is the reason we are having this town hall today. I've asked Meagan to write her story, and she did, and she's here today to share it with all of us. Meagan?
We are very fortunate in our community to have representatives like Congresswoman Speier that are speaking out. So, as you are aware, my name is Meagan Fishell, and my former in-laws are Randy and Judy Brown. And they reported one of the gunmen to the police and the authorities, not once, not twice, but 15 times before Columbine. And unfortunately, the police failed to act and complete an investigation. And on April 20th of 1999, next Saturday, two students who were only 5 weeks away from graduating did the unthinkable. They walked into their school, killed 12 of their classmates, 1 teacher, and injured another 24 students. But the sadness did not just affect the 39 individuals that one way or another didn't make it home that evening. It affected all of us. It affected me in my community. It took away an innocence. I mean, we never thought about school shootings before Columbine. And all of a sudden, we were faced with the tragedies that have happened. Again, my former in-laws reported one of the gunmen to the police for warning signs. One of the shooters was bullying my ex-husband. And they saw the warning signs and they spoke out. There are moments in every school shooting where we can prevent them, and it doesn't require us arming our teachers and bringing more violence into places of peace. The Brady campaign has said weapons of war do not belong in places of peace. Schools are places of peace, synagogues are places of peace, churches are places of peace, mosques are places of peace. These are places that guns should not be allowed, and we should not be allowing our teachers to be armed. And that's what's happening. Not happening in California. Thank goodness, not in California. But in 31 states, not including California, there are no laws on the books that stop the act of arming teachers. And there are some states that are advocating for it. Ohio is one of them. Kansas, Missouri, my home state of Colorado, Florida. These are all states that right now, as a teacher, you could potentially carry a gun into a school. So if we are able to see the signs before, the signs of mental illness, and one of the shooters was admitted to a counselor a year before Columbine that he was having homicidal and suicidal thoughts. He was experiencing a severe psychiatric illness, and unfortunately, his counselors failed to act. If we can see the warning signs before these students become armed or get guns in their hands, we can completely avoid these events. And the 39 individuals that didn't happen to make it home that day because of something bad that happened could be stopped. So thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my story, and thank you.
Meagan reminds me of that great Margaret Mead quotation, "Never doubt for a moment a few people can change the world. That's the only way it ever happens." Thank you again, Meagan. So clearly there are ways to reduce and even end gun violence. One person who has dedicated much of her career and life to make schools and communities safer is Nancy Magee, the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools. Soon after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, I felt we had to do something locally. So I convened a meeting of law enforcement, educators, school administrators, and nonprofit organizations, and we called that conference Beyond Newtown. Collectively, we had to do something to keep our students safe. Watching 6-year-old children being mowed down and buried in tiny coffins was too much to stomach. The new coalition, under the leadership of Nancy Magee, developed and implemented a remarkable set of emergency response protocols, suicide prevention tools, and a student threat assessment protocol that are now standard in San Mateo County. So put your hands together and thank Nancy Magee for that.
It's an honor to be here with the students. My life is about serving you. So it's a great inspiration to have you here and to see your leadership. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Dr. Winslow, I had the pleasure to hear you last week in Monterey, and one fact that he shared last week was someone, I think a foreign diplomat said after Newtown that the gun debate in America was over. That if we can allow and be okay with the murder of 6-year-olds, then who are we as a people? And that really stuck with me. So I am grateful for all of you here today to be here to prove that statement wrong and to continue the fight. Meagan, it was a pleasure to meet with you and hear your story, to get your resources and have your inspiration. And again, I'm inspired by the work that you're doing, so thank you. So the superintendent gig is new for me. I actually started this 6 years ago, as Congresswoman Speier said, after the Newtown tragedy. In April 29th, 2013, we convened at Oracle on the campus there with 300 plus leaders of law enforcement. Every superintendent was present. All our mental health partners were there, nonprofits, citizens, and we divided the day up into 3 buckets. And because I know from past experience that this is not a single solution problem, that you can't solve safety in schools by building fences, for instance. A fence is good, it has its purpose, but that one fence does not make a school safe. Really what makes schools safe is that we all have the knowledge, the awareness, and the ability to do what we can each do in our roles to ensure that every day we do everything to create a safe school. If that's to smile and be kind, that's what we need to do. If it's to refer a student to mental health services, that's what we need to do. If it's to convene a multidisciplinary team to share data about a student who's presenting a disturbing trend of behaviors, and that we work together across agencies to provide services to that student and that family before there's action that we would regret. That is what we need to do. So very briefly, let me just sum up what we are doing in San Mateo County. We are a county of 23 school districts, whether you like it or not, that's the fact. There's 20 cities in this county, again, 20 law enforcement agencies plus our sheriff. So when you talk about emergency response, when things are really happening and you need everybody to come to the fore, if you have 23 different ways of talking about it, thinking about it, and doing it, you're going to get nothing but a big mess, right? So we recognized right away that we needed to develop a county-wide protocol that was common across all 23 school districts, all 20 agencies, and we have developed a protocol called the Big Five. It's an immediate action response. It's very simple. It uses clear language, no codes, no code yellow or red. It's, you know, we call it what it is. You'll see these posters and these magnets in all schools in San Mateo County, but more than that, what this provides is a common place for conversations to happen. When people are speaking the same language, they come to understand each other. And the level of capacity in this county for emergency response and awareness has, the thermometer is really risen. So I applaud all of your efforts. I know there's a lot of school folks in the room. You have to lean in and make that a priority. The second thing we attacked was mental health for students, student mental health. At the time in 2013, we didn't have any way of convening conversations in all these different 23 counties around student mental health. And in that time, we developed a structure called School-Based Mental Health Collaboratives. So now there are 6 of them across the county, regionally based. These folks meet once a month. Everybody who's involved comes to the table, engages in conversations, understands trends, creates protocols. That's how we created the Suicide Prevention Toolkit. Was a need that was being expressed across the county for higher rates of students being admitted to hospitals on emergency crisis from school, and we had great concern about our students' mental health. So as a county, we created these protocols. And finally, the student threat assessment, I have to call out to Lieutenant Dave Okada, who's originally from Redwood City, but is now the lieutenant in Salem Kaiser, Oregon, who has been leading a successful threat assessment program for almost 20 years, and he trains all across the county. All across the country, sorry. He trained our teams. We now have a student threat assessment protocol at level 1, which is for all schools to conduct their own processes. If something is more concerning, it comes up to the level 2 team. That's a county-wide team. It involves law enforcement, probation, behavioral health, child family services, our school districts, our legal counsel, and other folks who are involved might have some knowledge about the case. They meet every single Monday at the County Office of Education, and in the year and a half that we've been meeting, we've heard 25 cases. What we do is, when these things come forward, it illuminates the challenges that a single student is having, that a single family is struggling with, and that a school district is really trying to support. These things often are so complex that county-wide resources are needed in order to fill the gaps. So we come around and we provide services and follow-up. We keep those cases open until we feel that the issues are completely resolved. So a case may stay open for more than a year while we continue to work with that student and that family. Does that ensure that we'll never have a violent incident here? I can assure you that it does not. And that the thought that it can never happen here and it won't happen here is the most destructive idea we can have. That we have to be vigilant, always working, but most importantly, we have to be working together. No one agency or person can do this alone. And I want to end by asking our team at the County Office of Education to stand up. If you could hold your applause. We have our Deputy Superintendent, Janae Luttrell, in the back. We have Director of Safe and Supportive Schools, Mary McGrath. Could you stand, please? And our new Coordinator of School Safety and Risk Prevention, Molly Hendricks. And these are the people who are making it possible to provide progressive leadership in this county. So now,
I don't know if you remember me, but you know my mother, Tego, at Peninsula Cleaners in Millbrae? My son was killed by multiple gunshots 123 days ago. I thank you so much for putting this together and opening up the dialogue, because it is desperately needed in this country. The fact that you have to put defensive trainings in place for the county and for the children, it's very, very needed, but it's crazy that we even have to think this way and live this way and put resources into this. And regarding the mental health issues, of the millions of people who have mental health issues, most of them don't end up shooters. And if they end up getting dirty guns, there's no way to track people. Regarding, and giving teachers guns, that's just going to pour more dirty guns into the streets, because if people know that teachers have guns, they're going to rob them for their guns to commit more crimes with those guns. It's only going to embolden and give the criminal element more firepower. What we need to do is we need to fight the NRA. We need to get the dark money out of politics. We need to fight the greedy rich men. It's not the principle of the Second Amendment that they brainwash the masses to believe. It's about cold, hard cash. Let's follow the money. Let's expose the CEOs, the lobbyists, the politicians. They're like a mafia triad that flood our communities with guns, and they make a mountain of money. Less guns pushes the prices up, and it makes it harder for people to get guns. Why can't we tax guns like we do cigarettes and alcohol and soda? Make them pay for the damage that they cause in our community. Make the gun manufacturers pay for these county-wide trainings. Why do the taxpayers have to pay for this? Make them pay for the gun violence research for the doctors. And the CDC, the taxpayers end up flipping the bill while the weapon industry makes billions, if not trillions of dollars. Let's make them pay. Let's get these guns off the street, because all of these little things that we do, although it will save our lives, it will not stop the guns.
Words, I think, are words that we recognize and embrace. We are making steps, certainly in this state, but not as quickly as we should be making it on a national level. You mentioned the CDC. We used to allow the CDC to do gun violence prevention research. That used to be the law in this country. But then the NRA was effective in getting an amendment called the Dickey Amendment passed that prohibited, believe it or not, prohibited the CDC from doing any research on gun violence prevention. Now we're going to change that, and we're in the process of doing that now. The only thing I can tell you is that the NRA is not as strong today as it was yesterday. And the fact that the students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas were able to get the legislature in Florida to do something with a powerful lobby of the NRA in Florida says that we can do it everywhere. So let me just point out that the Moms Demand Action group is here. Would you all stand so we can say Mama is on the move? And that's what this is all about. It is about all of us coming together across the country. Moms Demand Action has been around for just a few years, and yet they have between 3 and 5 million members now. That's nothing to sneeze about. So as we create the kind of grassroots efforts around this country on this issue, we will change it. I'm absolutely convinced we can do it, and we can do it certainly within our lifetimes and hopefully within the next 5 to 10 years.
How can I, as an average voter, influence people from another party who don't agree with me? I agree with you, Kamala Harris, Dianne Feinstein, on many issues. What good does it do me to write to you? How can I get other people to read and be influenced by my opinion?
So, good question. I think that as this issue has gained more traction in terms of coming up with solutions, I think writing to members of Congress or the U.S. Senate, our focus should be on the U.S. Senate now. As more and more senators hear about the groundswell across the country, there will be a growing recognition that something has to be done. So writing to all 100 senators is not a bad idea. Calling them is not a bad idea, especially if you have a phone that has an area code that's not 650. I actually recommended people get burner phones to do this kind of work. But we do respond to hearing from people. Now, it's more ideal to hear from people in your state, certainly, but there are ways of making your voices heard. Doctor, you have a recommendation?
I was just going to add to that I agree. I'm not, obviously not a politician, but we certainly feel the same way that at this point, the House has passed some very meaningful legislation, that should, if confirmed by the Senate, or rather if approved by the Senate and then signed by the President or the veto, we have 60 votes to override the veto, we can make it happen. One of the things that our organization is doing, and I'd like to single out, some of the people here in the room, including Professor Julie Parsonette and Brad Silver, who's also a member of Moms Demand Action, and Susie McLean, who's a retired Kaiser physician. But our group, which by the way organized this nationwide awareness event with 42 medical schools and hundreds of medical students around the country last September, we're actually going to try to recreate that in Washington, D.C. between the 10th and 12th of June this year. And by the way, your office has been just so helpful in getting that organized to actually primarily lobby the Senate. So we're going to have hopefully several hundred doctors, including from many of the very influential red states, and hundreds of medical students all wearing their white coats, showing up for an awareness event, and also going in and meeting with the staffers of these really key Senate states that we hope to be able to influence.
So something I wanted to add was one thing that you can do is you can start those difficult conversations. I know a lot of times we feel like because we don't agree with some person that there's no point even talking to them. But at the end of the day, a lot more of us are on the moderate scale of politics than on the two very bipartisan ends. But those two bipartisan ends are the ones who are getting highlighted by the media. So we feel as if it's a fight not worth fighting for, really. Another thing you can do is stay really well researched in topics that are most important to you. So if gun violence, hopefully gun violence, obviously gun violence is a topic most important to you guys, is very important, then you follow it by issue-based legislation, not by, oh, this person's Democrat, then I'm just gonna vote for them because they're probably focused on gun violence. And when you focus on issue-based, then you'll be a lot more educated in your research, and you can also inform people near you. And also with the letters, a lot of times politicians, they may be able to ignore letters or calls or emails or whatever. But if you post it on social media, or if you have like a friend who can post them on social media, they can't really ignore that. So that's something that I know in Parkland we did. We were very loud, not very pretty with it, but it got people's attention. And so sometimes that's something that you have to do.
I completely agree with the two speakers that spoke just before me. You have to find common ground with people. And if we can find the common ground that our job and our duty is to love and protect our children for a lifetime, and just start with that, and then go to the facts. And one of the facts of why I speak out against the idea of arming teachers is that there were 167 rounds of bullets that were shot into Columbine by the Denver SWAT team on April 20th of 1999. None of those rounds hit their intended target. There was a brief firefight with the police, but the majority of those bullets were shot when the gunmen were already dead and they had committed suicide. So those Denver SWAT team, in a moment, and you hear stories about police in the moment and how they lose track of things, and it becomes a fight or flight situation, and they were shooting at shadows. So what place do guns have, even if the Denver SWAT team can't handle the responsibility? What place do they have in our schools? So I would answer, you have conversations, you find common ground, and you have conversations with people that could potentially be affected by this, and you change mind with the facts.
To Meagan's point, the bill that is now in the Senate is a very modest piece of legislation. It is a bill that everyone should be able to support. It basically provides for a complete background check for all guns. That's what the law is, a background check for all guns, but we didn't include gun shows and online purchases and peer-to-peer purchases. Now, we're saying everyone should be subject to a background check. What does the background check do? It just makes sure that you're not a felon, that you aren't a misdemeanor having committed domestic violence, and that you are not deemed mentally ill by a court. So those are modest controls that we have in place, and all we're saying, that's the law already in this country, and we just want to make sure it is ironclad, that it affects all sales. So that is something that everyone, whether you're from the reddest state and the most conservative member to the most progressive. Okay, next question.
Thank you for this subject, gun violence prevention. I've been a big supporter of gun violence prevention. By the way, I'm a member of the San Mateo City Council. My name is Rick Bonilla. And I remember the after Newtown meeting in 2013. I was there. This is something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. Last year, students asked me to attend the March for Our Lives meeting, the march and gathering they had. I spoke there. I was very proud to be able to mention that in San Mateo, we do have these values where we want peace and safety and happiness for not only all of our students, but all of the residents of San Mateo. So I want to say that I'm going to be very proud to pick up the legislation that the county passed with Dave Pine, bring it to the city of San Mateo for gun locks. So thank you very much for having us here.
Things we learned at that particular Beyond Newtown conference was that the young people know. The young people know if someone is anguished or is a potential risk. Was that true in Parkland?
In Parkland, there were dozens of FBI reports about the shooter, and there was dozens of cop visits to the shooter's house, and nothing was done to stop him from accessing a gun, and he still did after countless visits.
So the point here is that if your child, your grandchild, is saying something about someone at school, don't take the position that it's none of my business. It's all of our business. And we need to recognize a responsibility to keep our communities safe. Okay, next question.
I have a question from the audience for the students. What is your message for young people who think their vote doesn't count or are too lazy to vote?
We are the future. The steps we take now are the steps that are going to affect our children, our grandkids. Every step we take to make a change is going to affect us in 10 years or be 20 years. I'd say, I know it may be difficult learning about something new, and you may think this issue doesn't affect me, but in reality, it's going to affect all of us. So I'd say, find something that you're passionate about and learn everything you can and try to put forth your initiative and your passion towards that, and that may help somebody else see, I can make a change, I want to better my community. And I'd say your vote counts, whether it's locally and national-wide or statewide. We are the change, and we will be the individuals who will help create a society where we want to live in and we want to prosper in.
I just want to echo what some of my fellow panel members have said about presenting the facts. And the fact is that in 2014, 13% of people aged 18 to 29 voted in the midterm election. And then in our last midterm election, it was about 31%. There's a clear change. And as Congresswoman Speier said, they passed, I think, the first legislation of that kind in about 20 years. So, and well, also, even in presidential elections, turnout doesn't surpass 60%. So there's clearly a lot of people still out there that can make a serious change.
Also on that note, those are really good points, is that the right to vote is inevitably a right. It's something that people have fought for years, and it is our duty as American citizens to take full service of this privilege. And the fact is, if someone's saying, like, I don't know if I'm going to vote, I'm being a little lazy, that means that they might not have some pressing issue that they feel that they need to vote on. And that's pretty lucky for them to have to do that. So they have to take it and vote on other people's behalf, some people that are too young to vote. And you shouldn't have to start voting when you're already hurt by one of these laws that are put in place. I mean, to be honest, I had no prior knowledge of any gun violence or gun bills before, and that's a shame that we only start taking action when it applies to us. If we only start taking action when it applies to us, we're all going to be harmed at the end, really.
So one of the good news stories is that a number of states are passing automatic registration at the time that you register your vehicle or you engage with any state agency. And the results have been really remarkable. And we're the only country that places the onus on the individual to register to vote. So in Georgia, for instance, a 93% increase in the number of people registered to vote because of the automatic registration. Imagine the impact it could have. Imagine if 16-year-olds had the right to vote. Maybe the NRA would not have the power. Yes, more questions?
Hi, Congresswoman Speier. My name is Henry Shane, and I go to Kahila Jewish High School in Palo Alto. And I am a co-director of the March for Our Lives Silicon Valley chapter alongside my friend here who will speak momentarily. And I just want to thank all of you up there on the panel for being here today and speaking and sharing your stories. I just want to voice off what you guys have had to say. Go out there and vote. Even if you're under 16, your voice matters. So walk out of school, protest. This is an everyday issue. So even if you can't vote, honestly, I'm trying to make that clear, your voice matters. So, and if you are at the legal age to vote, go out there and vote. Tell people, tell your community to vote, tell everyone you know, because every election gets more and more important every year. So this coming election, vote. Just vote. Go out there. If you're under 16, walk out and protest this. So I thank all of you up there.
Hi, my name is Sonia Walker. I'm the founder and director of March for Lives Silicon Valley, and I'm going to be 18 next month. First thing, I want to thank you for organizing this. I want to thank everyone here for being here, whether you agree with us or not. And since joining this movement in February of 2018, I want to say that this is not an issue where we can stand by and do nothing. It's not, do we build a new road or not? This is a very painful issue. And I personally have watched my friends and family die in my nightmares, dozens of times. And I'm lucky. I don't wake up and face this. My nightmare ends when my alarm goes off. And there are people out there every single day that face this, and their friends and their family are dead, and we could have prevented it. So please, this is not something that we can wait on. This is not something where we can do nothing. Your voice matters. We pushed for voter registration and voter turnout for youth in the midterms skyrocketed. It was a huge jump. So your voice matters, your vote matters, and please do something on this. Thank you.
My name is Linda Cooley. I would like to know how, and I'm sure many people would, how is the issue being addressed of politicians and congresspeople being able to get donations from the NRA? Because my understanding is that that's still very possible, but if I'm wrong, please clarify.
So, NRA has a political arm, a 501, they have a PAC in which they make contributions to members of Congress. They, under our laws and rules, they can create a PAC, like anyone can create a PAC, and contribute to members of Congress. It should become a poison pill every time a member of Congress takes a dime from the NRA.
This is a win. For 15 years, we
to ban gun shows at the Cow Palace. And there are many elected officials in this room and many community members who have worked on this together. Thank you all for doing this because we are winning this fight. On Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, at 10 o'clock at the Cow Palace, they have finally put us on the agenda. And we need people to show up and tell them we do not want gun sales on our public land.
Going back to the Sandy Hook, I was present at Oracle when Congresswoman Speier called this community together. I was one of among 300 or 400 people who were there. The interesting thing that she did was she made all of us pledge that we will not leave Oracle until we sign up for one of several choices to help the awareness of gun violence and become active. I happened to sign up with the committee that worked with Nancy Magee at our superintendent's office. And I still remember, I think it was over a year and a half, we met and mentioned Chief Barberini, and I was there. And so I'm very, very proud to have been in those roots, Nancy, and I want to let everybody know, if you need strong, powerful women, you've got 2 of them on that stage. And in addition, wonderful, wonderful youth also who are inspirations. Now, what I'm going to do is, our city council is having their annual goal-setting retreat today. And after I leave here, I picked up several badges, and I'm going to go to their retreat as a public member and tell them where I've been and what we need to do. When I saw in the Daily Journal the article of the supervisors passing for the unincorporated, it triggered in something in my mind. Well, this is so wonderful. What can I do to make something happen in Milford? So I'm going to go to the retreat, and I'm bringing badges for them, and I'm going to ask them as strongly as I can to please put that as a goal and have it agendized at a city council meeting.
To the previous comment about rallying the youth to participate in our politics and our public conversations, that the young people, the youth must remember the old adage that we've all lived by, that we do not inherit the land from our ancestors, but borrow it from our children. And with that, inculcate the sense of public service inculcate our sense of public service to do what we know is right, not just now, but for our future. Much like John Adams felt compelled to study politics and war so that he may protect his son's liberty to study mathematics and philosophy, so too do you. And all our parents strive to work for the public service to protect your children's liberty to study music and science. And for that, our thanks.
I do want to say that in San Mateo County, another thing we have done quite proudly is all of our district superintendents support the desire of students to voice their opinions and participate in walkouts. So we actually, in 2018 was a very tough year. Felt like shooting after shooting after shooting. It was when the Stoneman Douglas shooting happened. I think you guys had your March for Our Lives on something like March 22nd. So we convened all the county district superintendents, law enforcement, and there was a lot of effort that went into coordinating the ability of students to walk out and voice their opinions and participate. We want to make sure that those things happen so that students are safe while they are walking out of school and voicing their opinions. And I just hats off to all the superintendents and the educators and law enforcement partners in the room who make that possible. We absolutely are 100% in favor of our students being engaged citizens.
have a quick two-parter. First is we know that Trump banned bump stocks, which is, that's a good thing, right?
By the way, the NRA tried to sue, and the court refused to take the case. So
I'm glad you said that, because that's going to be part two of my question. So the first part is, I don't think Trump is as random as we think he is. We know he's as awful as we think he is, but not as random. So are there any successes in dealing with him based on this bump stock ban? Because I wasn't expecting that from him. So that's part one. Part two is, you mentioned the courts. The courts are now stacked. They're absolutely stacked. That was arguably the most important part of the 2016 election, and we blew it. And what do we do now? Because these things are going to go to the courts, and they're stacked with unqualified conservatives. And so I would argue that's even more of a scare to me than a Republican Senate right now. Those are lifetime appointments. So what do we do?
So, first of all, it's really important to appreciate that the courts have, since the beginning of time in this country, been where we have turned when everything else was gridlocked. Look at marriage equality. It didn't happen in Congress, it happened in the courts. The Brown versus the Board of Education. Integration happened in the courts. It is a more conservative court, but their positions are for life for a reason, so they hopefully are not going to be subject to the political winds. Again, they will read the American people. If we speak up, it makes all the difference in the world. And to the point about bump stocks, let's remember that the carnage that occurred in Las Vegas, the 57 people that were killed, the largest mass shooting in our country's history, also had over 500 people who were injured. So getting bump stocks banned throughout the country is something that we should be able to do and do quickly. We're going to have to bring this to a close. We've got just a few more minutes. If you ask really short questions, we can get a couple more in. Yeah.
Sandy Hook happened when I was in first grade, so growing up, school shootings have sort of been a fact of life for people my age and those younger. How, with lockdown and all that, do we teach the kids that that's not normal and evaluate the psychological aspect of those events?
The Big Five protocol that we use in San Mateo County is based on a principle called think on your feet. Rather than focus on shooters and scary things like that, we teach the idea that in emergencies you need to be able to react. And the more that you practice those actions, the faster your reactions are. So think on your feet can apply to all kinds of situations, can be something that you can develop, teach appropriately to kindergartners, and you can teach appropriately to third graders, eighth graders, and high school students. Additionally, we have a trauma-informed approach with our protocol. So in our protocol, we train our school leaders that doing surprise drills is not necessarily a good thing, that there's lots of other types of drills that you can practice, and it's all about emergency preparedness.
So we've talked a lot today about restrictions on assault weapons and gun stocks. However, most gun deaths in this country are due to handguns, and we already have more guns in circulation than citizens. We know from looking at our allies in Australia and New Zealand that swift radical action can happen if the political will is there. So I want to ask you, would you support more extreme measures such as gun buybacks and disarming the police to end gun violence overall rather than focusing on just school shootings and mass killing?
So I have been the sponsor of about 6 gun buybacks over the last 10 years, and I've funded them. And some people say, well, if you just take a gun, that's not going to make a difference. Believe me, it does make a difference. Lots of people inherit guns. They're in their homes. They don't want them. They're ripe for stealing and then being used in all kinds of criminal activity. One person that I'm reminded of, I was standing in line. We were taking guns from people. Obviously, the sheriff and the police department was doing that particular function, but I was saying, thank you for bringing your guns. As one gentleman says to me, I say, well, why'd you bring in your gun? She says, my wife and I got this as a wedding present. We don't think we need it. It's funny, but it also says something about our culture, doesn't it? All right, one last question.
I want to know your thoughts on what the right proposal is to increase security in schools, but not by arming teachers, but through trained security, such as law enforcement or some other protective force. But were they already there, so SWAT wouldn't be responding to the event. They would already be there, like during school time. What are your thoughts on that also?
Well, most schools already have community officers, do they not, Nancy? Really short answer.
We partner and we train with our school resource officers, and they are amazing supporters in our work, and we would not be as safe without them.
All right. Thank you all for coming. It's really wonderful.